to a new world of gods and monsters. It's the best line in the movie.
Oh, I know. And you steal it every time.
I absolutely do. So yeah, everybody. So welcome to the Film Club podcast, where a movie couple sits down and talks about movies. I'm Dean.
I'm Boo.
And this month we are going through a very special mini-series, very close to the Boo's heart. It's about monsters?
I believe it's called Monstober, yes.
Yes, Monstober. And this week we are going through The Bride of Frankenstein, which is one of your favorite films of all time?
One of my favorite of all time. I had to go back to our year in review from last year, where we did like our top 10 movies. Mm-hmm. It was on my top 10.
It was like number 9.
Yeah, but I think after, looking at my list, I think I gotta reshuffle things. It should be a little bit closer to the number 1 mark.
I gotcha.
But yeah, this is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's my favorite Universal Monsters movie.
That's interesting, because, granted, I haven't seen this movie in 20 years, probably, but...
Which is a very common Dean answer. Oh yeah, I love that movie. I saw it like 35 years ago.
I'm not even 35.
I know,
but the thing is well, think about it. Like, the last time I saw these was when I was a very small child, and the first time I saw them, they were on like a TV rerun thing. I remember The Bride, but I don't remember. I don't think I remember a lot of this movie. I remembered young Frankensteins doing riffs on this movie.
And after watching it now, you see more of the cues of where they took for young Frankenstein, yeah.
Yeah, and I found this to actually be like a really good movie, and I think it's probably the most James Whale's movie that James Whale ever made.
It's also one of the best sequels that beats out the original film.
Do you think this beats out Frankenstein?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I love Frankenstein. He's my favorite Universal monster. But this story is just so much more established that you feel like you're getting more of a movie than you do with Frankenstein. It moves very fast.
Yeah, I know we talked about Frankenstein last year.
Yeah.
And what we got from Frankenstein was, man, these are like a lot of bullet points from the movie, or bullet points from the novel that don't really flow into each other. I think Bride's kind of the same way. Well, okay, I did a lot of research for this episode. I deep dived. I got really into 1930s horror films. I watched like King Kong, Invisible Man, Old Dark House. Watched a lot of movies of the era.
When Dean says he did a lot of research and he watched these old movies, it's not just for the episode. You love watching old movies, any movies?
I do, and HBO Max has the TCM tab, and there's just so many movies on there.
Or you go on Peacock, where they have the classic Universal Monster films.
Yeah, but Peacock has the worst, client ever. It's so annoying to navigate it. It really is, but whatever. I realized this about at least horror movies or monster movies from this era, is plot doesn't matter. Usually the plot's super light. The movies are maybe 70 minutes, 80 minutes long, and they're more concerned with images, moments, and their themes. And Frankenstein's that to a T. There's a lot of cool images in it. Mm-hmm. It has a very deep theme, but there's not a lot going on in the movie. Bride of Frankenstein, it's different than that. There's actually a pretty followable plot.
Yeah.
But it's really more interested in the monster than with the bride, which is weird.
Yeah, because you'd think in a movie called The Bride of Frankenstein, we'd get a ton of the bride. And we only get about 6 minutes of the bride herself.
Yeah, which is so weird.
Yeah. I mean, it's give the woman her due. This is her movie. And for only being in the movie for 6 minutes, she's become an icon, and she's slated up there with, the Mount Rushmore of Universal monsters.
Well, yeah, because she's the only female monster.
Yeah, I mean, we, in later years, we get Dracula's daughter,
The Brides of Dracula, but they don't count. They're henchmen, right?
Yeah, it's more just, filler movies where they're good, but they're not as good as the Four Horsemen of Universal horror.
Universal monsters.
Yes.
Yeah. The thing is with Bride, though, is it seems like the Bride character was, like, tacked on at the very, very end to push a theme with the monster. And I don't know if Wales was that interested in it, but man, she is so striking.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she's, on everything Universal, when it comes to horror. I mean, let alone when we went to Universal Studios recently, they have that new poster of her on the side of the parking structure, and it's just her headshot, basically. And it's just, she's gorgeous. And it's like, why couldn't we get more time to establish her as a character versus Frankenstein, the monster, gets rejected, and I'm gonna kill both of us.
Well, that goes into the whole, like, theming of the movie for, like, Frankenstein as a character, but let's talk about how this movie actually got to the screen, like, how it got made, because...
This was a struggle.
Well, it was a struggle because James Whale didn't want to do it.
And I could totally get that, you have Frankenstein, knocks it out of the park, and it's like, well, let's make it, a standalone film. That's it. We get to the windmill, big fire, done.
Yeah, and Whale said, I milked the entire idea. If I go back, it's just gonna be a retread, or it's gonna be something else, and honestly, James Wales didn't like making horror films. Like, he made 4 in his career. It's Frankenstein,
The Bride, The Invisible Man,
Old Dark House, right?
Old Dark House,
and Old Dark House, even that's more like a black comedy than a horror film. But that's, like, kind of James Wales' thing. He wanted to make comedies, he wanted to make dramas, he wanted to make musicals. I think he did horror movies because he was really good at them, but I don't think he wanted to do them.
Yeah. But, I mean, I like that he wanted to do something else, and he was still able to incorporate his comedy into these movies.
Oh, yeah, they're hilarious.
Yeah, because it's like, when you sit there and watch it, it's like, I'm not going to take, all of this serious because it wasn't written to be serious. I mean, we have Una O'Connor in this, who is just
oh my God,
milking it, and it's like, I'm just taking it because she is so funny. She's such a unique actress.
Is she the first actress you can point to and say that's where camp came from?
I think so, yeah.
Because I got this watching this movie in particular, where, man, campy as a concept, that kind of, like, over-the-top, broad humor, the kind of, like, weird melodramatic acting, like, that kind of stuff. This seems like the earliest film I can think of where, this is just camp through and through. Everyone's acting, like, over the top. Also, the guy playing, Dr. Pretorius.
Yes.
He is another level. That man is the definition of camp.
I mean, wasn't he, like, a thespian, too?
Well, they're all thespians, but yeah, he was a theater guy.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, he actually had, like, a big, ton of theater cred beneath him, and it's like, you get that in this movie, where he's really selling it to the audience.
No, he's just rolling his R's as he stalks to the back of the auditorium and letting them know that the Bride of Frankenstein has arrived.
Pretty much, yeah.
Maybe not that exaggerated, but, like, in my mind, that's where he is.
Yeah, it's pretty up there.
But that's the thing, because the movie, like, Frankenstein is a massive hit.
Yes.
And it's Carl Laemmle, I think he owns Universal. He's running Universal more or less at this time.
Carl Laemmle owns Universal, and then his son, Carl Laemmle Jr., is the one that is producing it, and really the one that started the horror trend. Because his dad was kind of like, we don't need to do horror movies, and his son's like, no, trust me, we gotta do these horror movies.
Because they made money.
They made money, yeah.
Did. Because Dracula and Frankenstein released in the same year. They're like 6 months apart. Both of them do gangbusters. And he's like, well, let's crank out some more. And I think
also leading up to, later Universal monster movies, they would do double screenings of Frankenstein and Dracula together. And people would be lined up all night just to go to these showings. So it's like, yeah, you're cranking in a ton of money. Let's push the concept.
Well, exactly. So he's like, these movies make gangbusters. Why not make more? But the three horsemen of a movie not getting made showed up at the same time. they had the unwilling director. Director didn't want to come back.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, well, whatever. We'll try and get, like, Karloff to come back. Karloff's like, that movie was hell to make.
Yeah.
That makeup, almost killed me. I basically broke my back on it.
Yeah.
I'm out. And they're like, maybe we can use the other guy, Colin Clive. He was the lead, and Colin Clive at that point got the reputation of being unreliable because he had a drinking problem. He really could only be reined in by whale, tail of a whale or two. He could only be reined in by whale, and he was a good actor, but you couldn't depend on him unless he had a strong director behind him. And they were like, okay, so the 3 key players of this franchise dipped.
Yeah.
Shit. Okay, we'll try and figure it out. They do The Mummy the next year. They managed to bring Whale in to do The Invisible Man in 33. Yeah. And even that was a titanic feat. Like, Whale had to have 2 bombs in a row for them to rein him in for that. And then for this movie, they were like, look, Jimmy, baby, we'll give you double the budget of Frankenstein to do it. He's like, you'll give me $400,000 to make this movie? And he's like, yes. I want creative control. Fine, Jim. We'll give you full-blown creative control. And that is why he did it.
Well, technically, they didn't agree to full control, but however, Carl Laemmle decided to have his summer vacation at the same time that they were filming the movie, and he's like, well, boss is here, so I guess that means I got full creative control. But you're forgetting the 4th horseman was getting a good script to tell the rest of the story.
Oh, you're right.
And it took 9 screenwriters to finally come up with a strong, cohesive script.
Yeah, because I heard that there are like 9 canonical scripts for the Frankenstein sequel, and each one is more ridiculous than the last. Like, I think one of them is like, there's an army of Frankensteins now. I think there's another one where it's set in the future and it's like Metropolis.
Hey,
one of them has Frankenstein with X-ray vision and heat eyes.
I mean, if I want my army of 12-foot tall skeletons from Home Depot, I would totally take an army of Frankensteins.
But that's the thing. All these sequels were ridiculous.
Yeah. I think there's even concept art or poster art where Frankenstein's like shooting rays out of his eyes.
Oh yeah, he's like 50 feet tall and he's shooting ray guns out of his eyeballs, and I don't know if that's like a Japanese print kind of thing. Like, it was like a poster that was made in Japan because they didn't know what Frankenstein was and they just made a monster poster, or if it was something else.
I think it was something else, because I've seen it a couple of times. I just didn't think to look it up before we started recording, but it's one of those things that I've seen before and I'm just like, huh? Like, that's not Frankenstein, but whatever.
Exactly. But that's the thing. The movie goes through this entire production hell until Wales kind of gets strong-armed into doing it.
Yeah.
And yeah, he didn't get creative control, but it was one of those, like, well, I get creative control because you're giving me the leeway to do kind of whatever I want. It's like a handshake deal.
Yeah.
And he's also dealing with, like, the production code at that point, which is a whole other topic of conversation we don't need to get into. But he finally gets Bride of Frankenstein going, and he's able to cast basically anybody he wants.
Yeah.
And do you want to tell people, I guess, the brief of what the Bride of Frankenstein's about? Like, what actually happens in it?
I think you should in a dramatic way.
In a dramatic way?
Yes. I think you need to go back to your theater days.
my theater days as a thespian.
Because you were in, theater in high school.
Yes, I played the tree. So, here is the synopsis I got from the back of the box.
Man, you got a lot of backs of boxes.
It's the bit. After Henry Frankenstein recovers from the attacks of his creation, he is approached by Dr. Pretorius to join him in raising a new creature, a female creature. But, as they toil away, Frankenstein's monster returns to seek revenge on his creator, and to claim the new monster as his bride. Dun dun dun.
I'm sold.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's a very basic pitch, and it's fascinating because it picks up right where the last movie left off.
Yeah, and I mean, not just like picking up where the movie left off. No, I mean, like, we get a full-blown recap
yeah, we get the complete recap because the movie opens. We're going into this really kind of stunning miniature castle, and
Mhm.
inside of that is Mary Shelley,
Mhm.
played by Elsa
Oh,
Lanchester,
yeah.
and like Percy Shelley
And Lord Byron.
and Lord Byron, and they're like, "Oh, Shelley, you really told a spooky old tale the other
Mm.
night."
I was going through some of my books last night researching about the film, and I saw somewhere that, the birth of this idea that she had for Frankenstein was actually a ghost story telling contest that Lord Byron came up with.
Yeah,
And I was just like, huh. So it's like, okay, we're just hanging out at the house. There's not a lot to do. Let's see who could come up with the best ghost story. And then you come up with Frankenstein.
yeah.
Like, what?
Oh yeah, I've heard this story before because it was it's literally the story of, oh, it was a cold and dark stormy night, and literally it was a cold and dark stormy night.
Yeah.
They were rained out and they were gonna go like fox hunting that day, but they couldn't. So they were like, all right, well, everybody's here. Anybody got a good ghost story? Because it's the 1700s. So what else are you gonna do? You didn't have cable.
Just
So
stare at fire.
exactly. So she came up with like, it wasn't the whole story because Frankenstein's kind of a long book,
Yeah.
but she basically came out with the entire plot points. Like she beat it out the entire thing. And this movie opens and it's kind of the same way. It's a dark and stormy night outside. They're like, "Oh, Shelley, how
The air
did that
itself is
story?"
filled with monsters.
Yes, it's all spooky. And they're like, "Shelley, how did the rest of it go?" And then the framing device is Mary Shelley is telling us her sequel to Frankenstein.
Well,
the
she's just
other
continuing.
end.
She's continuing the story
Yeah.
because this movie, they pick and choose from the book too what they didn't get in the first film.
Yeah, it's like the other half of the novel,
Hmm.
which is weird because these are not good adaptations of Frankenstein.
No, I think the most authentic one is supposed to be the one with De Niro and Kevin
Kenneth Branagh.
Branagh, yeah.
Yeah, that one's from like 90 something.
Yeah, I think that one's supposed to be the most accurate because the monster talks, but not like in this movie. He actually is able to
Converse,
Yeah.
and his reasonings for doing things are a lot more accurate, and how Frankenstein works and does things is
Mhm.
is way different. And also, sidebar real quick. So you've seen like the 90s Mary Shelley Frankenstein movie?
Oh yeah, that was in one of my advanced English classes when we went to Fullerton College.
Yeah.
My professor's like, "Yeah, we're gonna talk about Frankenstein." I was like, "Awesome!" And she's like, "We're gonna watch it." Awesome. All right, it's from 1990. What?
You're like, this movie exists?
And I was like, "Okay, this is not the Frankenstein that I know, but all right."
So, do you remember that era of like the 1990s where you had like when Francis Ford Coppola did Dracula
Yeah.
and Branagh did Frankenstein, but there was also another movie and it was called Mary Riley, and it was like an adaptation of Jekyll and Hyde.
That one I don't think I've seen.
Okay. It might be one of the worst adaptations of Jekyll and Hyde I've ever seen.
And you love Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
It's like one of my favorite books, like no joke. But I watched it and it stars like Julia Roberts and John Malkovich.
Mhm.
And Julia Roberts is putting on like an Irish accent that's on the Cameron Diaz level of Irish accents. And then it's John Malkovich who
It's just being John Malkovich.
he's being John Malkovich. So when he's like Henry Jekyll and he's like, oh, kind and honest Henry Jekyll, but it's John Malkovich, so you're like, you're sure he doesn't eat people? You sure he doesn't eat people? And then when he's, Mr. Hyde, you're like, okay, so now we're cutting the pretext. He eats people, right? He totally eats people. So it's such a totally weird movie.
Yeah.
The production design's interesting, but yeah, so I'm just pointing it out that in the 90s there were a lot of those movies that were taking on classic like monster lore and tried to retell them, and
Yeah.
I just remember that one being pretty bad.
Yeah.
But back to this movie.
Yeah, the Frankenstein one in the 90s, it wasn't bad. It was just, okay, so this is more of what the novel is supposed to be. I get it. And it's like, okay, it's an interesting story. And I've tried to read my way through Frankenstein. It's a little
It's dry.
It's a little dry. I mean, everything happens at the end, so it's like you got to work your way through to see, why things are happening. He brings him to life fairly early and then just dips. And it's just like, okay, but then you still got a lot of stuff to chew in between, you know, the middle and the ending.
I mean, the one that I found the most readable out of those, like, older, like, classic monster works, other than Jekyll and Hyde. Jekyll and Hyde's a really easy read. It's like 100 pages.
Okay.
But Bram Stoker's Dracula is a pretty breezy read.
Yeah, that one I read through fairly fast.
Yeah. And, also, like, The Invisible Man. But
yeah,
it's really weird quantifying H.G. Wells, because he was alive for, like, World War II. He's not... His works are not that far back. So he's a pretty modern writer.
Do you know H.G. Wells actually has a connection to Elsa Lanchester?
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. What is it?
So, her first 3 films that she ever appeared in were written by H.G. Wells. They were silent films.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know H.G. Wells was a screenwriter.
Yeah. Well.
Which is another thing. People are like, wait, H.G. Wells, like the Invisible Man guy, the Time Machine guy, he was alive for movies. He was alive for movies, and he saw his own movies adapted into films, which is astounding to me, because I thought that guy died in, like, the 1880s.
Oh, it was the same thing, like in our Dracula episode, where we talked about, I think Bram Stoker had just passed when they were making the movie, but they had to go to his wife.
Well, he died before they did Nosferatu. He died in, like, the teens, I think. Because that was a big argument, because, like Nosferatu, it's an adaptation of Dracula, but they didn't buy the rights.
Yeah.
But they had an issue, because they were able to, like, skirt it for a little bit, because Stoker wasn't alive.
Mm-hmm.
And copyright law was, like, weird, but his wife was. But they're like, well, his wife didn't write it, so she doesn't own it, really. And she was like, no, I fucking own it. Like,
that's my husband.
That's my husband. Yeah, he fucking died, but I still own the fucking work. Yeah. And that's why Nosferatu was in a weird legal mumbo jumbo for a while.
I mean, it's getting its remake, or
it's getting a remake now. It's directed by Robert Eggers, who did The Lighthouse and The Witch and The Northman, and that guy is great. I love all the movies he makes. He's probably my favorite director working right now. And that one has, like, Bill Skarsgård playing Count Orlok, and I'm fascinated to see what that looks like.
Nicholas Holt's gonna be in it. I heard he just signed on.
I heard that too. And Anya Taylor-Joy's in it as something, but they haven't confirmed what. I'm interested to see who else they're gonna drag into it, because he has a lot of, like, good actors he's pulled for his previous films. But yeah, so The Bride of Frankenstein.
Yes, we gotta get back to our film here.
It's been a minute. So she's recounting the whole story. But when this movie actually picks up in media res, we have Henry being taken back to the castle, how he is not dead from being thrown off of a 5-story building, snapping his back on a windmill, and crashing to the hard cobblestones below. I don't know.
Can we just talk about how good and clean that recap was that we get?
It's super quick. It snaps through in, like, under a minute.
And it gives you all the points of how we got to this moment. And we're right back to the windmill, you know, the fire kind of dwindling down and burning out. And, poor Henry.
And all the villagers, you can tell, are from a whole different movie. They're all dressed completely different. And They take Henry off, and they're like, oh, we gotta take him back to the castle to recover. And
basically to say goodbye.
Because they think he's dead.
Yeah.
Which he fucking should be. Like, that only part of this movie, I'm like, well, hold the fucking phone.
Well, we've got another part where it's like, really?
Really? Hold the fucking phone. But as they're doing that, the parents of
Little Maria,
who the monster kills in the last movie, they're looking for the monster because they want to make sure he's dead.
Well, it's the father. He's the one that, wants proof. He wants to see the blackened bones of the monster that killed his daughter. And the wife is like, it's not worth it. We saw the fire. He's gone. I don't need to lose you too. And then he goes and jumps into the hole.
Well, he falls in. He falls into the water because there's water under the mill.
Yeah.
And that's when you have the monster emerge from around the corner and strangle the fuck out of him.
I mean, just seeing that hand appear out of nowhere and work its way up to his shoulder, like, oh shit, the monster's alive.
Karloff had good hands.
He's pissed off. Oh yeah, he has great hands.
And okay, so we get our first image of the monster, of Boris Karloff here. Mm-hmm. And Boris Karloff is a very unique actor,
Yeah.
especially for the time. Because how old is he in this? He's like 50?
That's one thing I didn't look up.
I want to say he's like almost 50 for this, because this comes out in 34, right? And he was born in 87?
Yeah, this came out in... No, actually 1935.
35.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he'd probably be like 40. He's like 48. Like, he's almost 50, right? And that's something kind of crazy, because he broke in Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And, okay, so now he's this famous actor.
Mm-hmm.
And he's famous in, like, monster movies. And it's so weird to think of an actor that breaks that late. Like, most actors, especially of this era, they become leading men in, like, their 30s. He's, like, almost 20 years down the line from this. And his career outlasts that.
Yeah.
By far. Because he dies in 69, he's, like, 81. Mm-hmm. And he makes movies all the way to the end.
Yeah.
And he's, like, a named actor all the way down the line. So, you would think, like, okay, he does Frankenstein, he does, like, The Mummy, he does, like, Bride of Frankenstein, and then that's, like, kind of it.
And then he does Son of Frankenstein.
Is he always the monster?
Just in those 3 movies. He comes back in another film where someone else is Frankenstein. I can't think of what the movie is, but he's the doctor this time. After Son of Frankenstein, he's like, that's it. I'm not doing it.
Because that makeup was a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I think he did the makeup once more after that, but that was for, like, a charity thing. It's really famous pictures where he did, like, this charity function, but it was, like, a baseball game, and he's at the bat, dressed up as Frankenstein, hitting balls. Hitting balls, yeah, hitting a homer or something, and it's just like, huh, okay, like, that's...
Neato.
Yeah, but yeah, I think after this, because I think in this movie, he broke his hip.
Doesn't surprise me.
Because I know they had a stuntman for him, like, when they were doing, like, the mill scene in this movie, but I think he slipped into the water, and I think he broke his hip, and they're like, well, we could, tape it up for you. So it's like, yes, these movies have broken this man, but he is just so strong, he powered through.
Because, like, if you want to just go through the injuries he's had on the 2 movies, in Frankenstein, he broke his back.
Yeah.
In Bride of Frankenstein, he breaks his hip. I assume in Son of Frankenstein, he probably broke something else.
Possibly. I haven't done the research for that. I also haven't seen that movie.
Really?
Yeah.
That's surprising.
Well, it's his last one, so it's kind of like...
It's kind of feels bad.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna guess that one's kind of like at the point where he probably can't, like, deal wearing the 40 pounds of gear anymore.
Well, that, and also in that one, he reverts to not speaking again.
Weird.
Yeah.
Well, that's like a thing, because Whale didn't want him to speak, because he had this weird lisp.
Yeah, he had a lisp, and Karloff didn't want to speak, because he thought, that's not the monster, and, you gotta take his bridge out to make him look, really, hollow and
gaunt and
gaunt.
Look like a dead person.
Yeah, so with this movie, since he speaks, he had to put the bridge back in, which gave him a more fuller look, but I think it works.
I don't know if it does, because this is the first image we see of the creature, right? And it's after the burn, and his hair's, like, singed, and it... Unironically, for a split second, I thought, is that the stunt double? Is that... For a split second, I didn't realize that wasn't Karloff, because I had just watched Frankenstein, like, right before I watched this, right? Because I wanted to have a nice lead into it.
Yeah.
And it's like, because in Frankenstein, he's so gaunt. Like, like, the cheeks are completely pulled in. He has such that, like, long face. And it's such, like, that striking image with, like, the hair and the flat top. And it's like, oh, that is Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And in this, it's like, oh, his face is a lot, like, square off. Like, it's a lot rounder. The hair's, like, singed back. Yeah. With that makeup effect, which, at first, I thought, man, that makeup looks weird. But the more I looked at him, like, no, there's a lot of detail going into that. Like, that's actually a really, like, good makeup job, but it's so subtle.
Done by the iconic Jack Pierce, who has done, so many Universal monsters.
He's, like, the original makeup artist, right?
Yeah, he is. And in this movie, after working with Boris in the first movie and just, the labor of getting him into costume for that, You know, he kind of cut it down by making it 5 hours in this movie.
Instead of the original
I think
6?
I think it was like between 6 to 8 hours to get him in full makeup.
Jesus
where
Christ.
I think I read somewhere that Elsa Lanchester had said like he had to come in at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to begin, you know, the makeup process.
Yeah, because he has to be ready to go at like 6 or 7.
Somewhere in there, yeah. But in this movie, I guess Jack Pierce had found a way to kind of cut down the time where his flat top, he created out of a piece of rubber. So it was like this thing that he was able to just kind of attach to the hair and like paint it so it matches his skin.
Yeah, that might be the thing. Because the makeup effects have evolved.
Mm-hmm.
They look... They're probably much easier for Karloff as an actor to work with, but they look just different enough that I thought this monster effect, like this monster like makeup work, made Karloff look too different, at least to me, for like that split second when I see him the first time. Literally after this scene, once I get used to it, it's like, oh no, it's fine. He can act through the makeup. Yeah. It's the bridge and the cheeks. It makes his head look weird. But,
it makes it look bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, I love his makeup in this one. I feel like it lends to his character, because in the first movie he's more pure and childlike, and this movie he's an angry teenager, and I feel like
he's more scarred by life.
Yeah, I mean, you could physically see the scarring on him. So it's like, yeah, I feel like this look goes with this new version of him that we get.
I think that's true. Again, I don't even know if that was a nitpicky thing. It's just a thing where I noticed it.
Yeah.
And it was a little weird, but
there's a colorized picture of him. I mean, it's very popular, this image. It's him standing like on the hill where the windmill is. And it's just like a set photo that they took of him standing there. And someone colorized it, and it's like, yeah, you look really cool with, you know, the burns and the scars on his arms, and like, this is really, really good makeup work.
Oh yeah. But after he kills the Maria's dad, he then kills Maria's mom.
Because she thinks that
he's the dad.
Yeah.
And, you know, the monster goes on a murder rampage across the countryside.
Because he's pissed.
Because he's pissed, obviously. And while he goes off and he runs into the woods, we go back to the castle. Mm. And at the castle...
Chateau Frankenstein.
And at the castle, Henry's recovering, and in walks the most flamboyant mad scientist in the cinema history, your spirit animal.
Even after Dr. Frankenfurter?
You know, like, I think Dr. Pretorius and Dr. Frankenfurter would have a lovely time.
I'd pay to see that movie.
It would be so good. Because, okay.
I love Rocky Horror.
I know you do. So Dr. Pretorius finally shows up. And this is where the movie really starts.
Yeah.
Right? Because he shows up and he's like, Henry, so I know we haven't talked in years, but I've been able to create tiny people in jars.
Well, no. I've been able to create life. And I can prove it to you. And it's like, okay, you got Henry hooked.
And this is moments after he's looking at Elizabeth being like, oh, I was so mistaken. I'll never do that ever again. Oh, wait. You got more? Oh, baby, I'll be right back. Me and Doc, we're gonna have a beer. Totally fine. Show me the fucking homunculi. Show me what the fuck you got in the drawers. Henry is such the villain of this movie.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he gets away with it. And then even Pretorius to really, you know, sick his teeth into him is like, you know, technically, you're the one to blame for all those murders that have happened. It's not the monster. It's your fault.
You created the monster. Come on now. And, okay, do you want to talk about Karloff and Clive real quick here?
Sure, let's go for it.
Okay, because does he look like 45 in this movie? He looks rough.
It's only a 4-year gap in between movie 1 and movie 2. And this man looks like he's aged about 10, 15 years in between.
Yeah, which we mentioned earlier, he had a problem.
He had an alcoholism problem, and we talked about before, you know, with, you know, actors before where they looked a lot older than they actually were. Just, you know, the progression of aging back then was a lot compared to now, where you can, you know, kind of preserve your looks.
And we talked about this, or I think we might have mentioned it at one point in our Thing episode last month, where you see Wilford Brimley, and you're like, was that man like 55 his entire career? Like that happens with Colin Clive a little bit, because you see him in Frankenstein and he looks, 30-ish, right? And you see him in this, and where would you ballpark him?
Probably mid-40s. It's like, man, you took a really big jump. It's like, what happened?
A hard living was what happened to him. 'Cause
addiction, yeah.
I think, doesn't he die like a few years after this?
Yeah, he died, I think, a handful of years after this.
It was like 38, I think.
Yeah, and then, before this movie filmed, he actually, I think, broke both of his legs.
I assume in some sort of drinking accident.
He was horseback riding. I think he got thrown off his horse. So that's why...
Drunk horseback riding?
I don't know. I don't want to make any claims, but...
I will make that claim.
You always make dramatic claims.
But yeah, so...
Yeah, he died at 37.
Oh, he died in 37?
And he died in 1937.
That's rough.
Yeah.
Granted, I don't know how his career would have, worked out after this movie. Because at this point, he had the reputation of having problems and being unreliable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the worst thing to get, right? If you're... Because he wasn't... I don't think he was, a leading man. I think he was, mostly a character actor.
Yeah.
But you don't want that. You don't want difficult or unreliable attached to your name when you're working as an actor.
Definitely.
Unless you're Brando. Then you can have insane person attached to your name, but if you're Marlon Brando, you'll still get work.
Yeah, and I mean, Colin Clive wasn't at Brando's level, so yeah, of course it's going to be an issue, with other people trying to hire you, because word spreads, and it's, trying to get people to, believe you that, hey, I can be there, I can quit, I can do this. It's like, I don't think so when you're showing up to set and you're drunk and you're acting and you're drunk.
Granted,
which you don't see it in the movies.
Well, I think it's because Whale knew exactly how to use him. Because Clive has this manic energy and this, unhinged persona about him. He works as this, ravaged, one-track minded, obsessive, mad scientist. He works as Henry Frankenstein.
And that's what Whale wanted. He wanted to show this side of Henry when the studio's like, just hire somebody else, we can get away with having a new Henry Frankenstein just like we can get away with having a new Elizabeth.
That would have been, which is so weird.
And you could tell right off the bat, it's like, dude, you're not Elizabeth, she was blonde. And she had the 20s kind of...
the 20s bob.
The bob, yeah. I was just like...
When Elizabeth walks out with the long flowing locks, and I'm like, who the fuck is this?
And he's like, oh, Elizabeth, and I'm like, nuh-uh.
Elizabeth, you get some work done in between? Were you dolling yourself up for the wedding?
Oh, so you could see, young Frankenstein where they get, Elizabeth played by Madeline Kahn. It's like, okay, you're basing her off of this Elizabeth.
Yeah. And I just wanted to bring up Colin Clive here because he does really good in this movie, but then you have him playing against Ernest Thesiger, and he's playing Dr. Pretorius, and he is stealing every fucking scene he is in. When they go back, because they meet up and, Pretorius takes him back to his little, laboratory and shows him, these are the things I've been creating, Henry, and shows him the little king, the little queen, the tiny bishop, the little mermaid.
The little devil.
The little devil, and I love it. You see this little devil? There's a striking resemblance to someone I know. And he's, smiling at him, you are chewing so much scenery, it must be smothered in ketchup. I swear to God.
I mean, let alone his full name is Septimus Pretorius, which is Latin for Royal Seven or the Seven Deadly Sins. So it's like, they're just throwing it at you that this man is evil.
He's the Mephistopheles character in this. Because the movie is dealing with these themes pretty early, from the jump. Yeah. Where, it's this kind of biblical story. Henry's being brought in by this evil, demon person, right? And that's Thesiger, or Pretorius. And Pretorius is, he's this evil overlord who only has evil intentions. And I'm like, well, Henry's also not a very good guy. And there's a lot of, like, Christian imagery in here.
Yeah.
Like, when the monster is caught the first time.
Yeah, and they string him up, and
He's literally doing the Christ pose.
Yeah, he's, Christ on the cross. And it's just like, you have these really, really strong images. And then when, Henry sees the little people that he's created in the jars, and he's like, that's not science, that's black magic. And I'm like, dude, you brought somebody back from the dead.
Yes, you are both dealing in stuff beyond your ken.
Yeah, I'm like, this is, realms and realms of just, what?
But it works so well because Thesiger, the actor, he's just going for it.
Oh, yeah.
There's no wink to the audience being like, guys, I know this is ridiculous. You know this is ridiculous. Just roll with it. He's like, so audience, do you see my giant cloak? He's literally doing that shit.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. I love this performance.
Oh, absolutely. He's one of the shining stars of this movie.
And it's because Whale was making a comedy.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty obvious. He's like, half the time it's just a straight up comedy.
Mm-hmm.
The other half is this really, I want to say, like, a personal story with Frankenstein's monster, because Whale grew up, I know he grew up Catholic. He was very, like, religious early.
I believe his dad was a pastor.
I believe so. And he was also an openly gay man in Hollywood back in, like, the 1920s, 30s. Like, I don't think he ever hid it.
No.
I don't know if it was one of those things where he just never brought it up to people, but if they ever asked him, he would just tell them.
Yeah.
Was that how it worked?
Yeah, it wasn't, he ever hid. It was just, I'm not going to talk about it unless you bring it to me, and then, yeah, I'm not afraid to talk about it.
But with that, Whale is really imbuing the film with a lot of Christian iconography, and there's a little bit of, like, the subtext of the film that codes certain characters as gay.
Yeah.
Thesiger as Dr. Pretorius, he's very coded as a gay character, with him seducing Henry, and how they're trying to create life. Like, it's two men trying to create life.
Yeah.
Where that's, like, a big deal back then, where it's like, oh, how are two, gay men going to procreate and create a family? And they're like, we shall do it with science, which is a whole other thing. And with the monster is creating these relationships with whatever people that will accept him. He creates, like, a very harmonious relationship with the hermit.
Yes.
Which, best sequence of the film.
Oh, yeah. I love the sequences with Frankenstein and the hermit. They're just so wholesome. They take us back to the first movie where, he's just very childlike, versus the rest of the movie where he's being hunted and people are trying to kill him.
And it's the first time the monster understands that, oh, people can be kind?
People can be good.
People can be friend. I like how that's the line you steal from this movie, and not, smoke, good.
Well, I mean, I have asthma, so smoke, bad.
It's just so funny that no one brings up the fact that he also says, smoke, good. Wine, good. Bread, munch. Like, it's great.
If there's one thing that I'm going to take away from this movie, it is going to be his gusto of eating bread. Bread, and then he takes a big bite out of the loaf. I'm going to
rips it like it's a couch cushion.
I'm going to live my life like that every day, where it's just, you know what? I'm going to take a huge bite out of this French bread and not give a fuck who, doesn't get a bite. Like, that's all mine.
So greedy.
But bread good.
So, we have this scene where you get a Christian iconography.
Yes.
You get the hermit literally thanking God for sending him a friend.
Yeah.
You have the monster literally kind of, like, creating this, relationship that is, like, based in love, it's based in kindness. And it's destroyed once the outside world invades it. Once they're both, brought out, then they, it breaks it apart. Society deems this unusable, habitable. They can't do it.
Yeah, because we don't know how long the monster stays with the hermit. Could be a day, it could be, a week, it could be a month.
It has to be a while, because He learned to talk, and the monster was literally born yesterday.
Yeah, and that's what makes this movie a trip, is just, it's been like a couple of days.
Yeah, in-universe it's been a few days.
It's been a few days, so we're not really sure where we are once he's been with the hermit, and the hermit's teaching him to talk, and teaching him, fire bad, no, fire good, fire, helps us do things. But it's just sweet to see, that he's very nurturing, and the monster is able to, kind of give that back to the hermit, where, oh, I love music, so let me hand you the violin because this is what I want. I'm finally telling you what I need, what I want.
Yeah.
And when he pulls out the stool and he sits there and he's very childlike, just, enjoying the music.
And it's a really interesting thing because we as the audience completely identify with the monster.
Yeah.
Like, the monster's the hero of the story. Like, I don't think anybody's gonna watch the movie and think,
Go Henry!
Yeah, no one's gonna say that. Henry, from the jump, is the bad guy.
Yeah, and I mean, he's
only good in comparison to Pretorius.
Yeah.
Right?
But it also, another kind of thing that it paints for you is child and parental roles, where Henry created the monster and abandons him.
Yes.
And the hermit, stumbles upon the monster, brings him in, and raises him like a child.
I feel that might even go into Whale's backstory, because I don't know how his relationship with his father worked out. Most of my book learning of James Whale's comes from the movie Gods and Monsters.
Yeah. And from that movie, we see that his father's kind of on the strict side, straighten up and, go to school and do this and do that. And it's just, it's not the softer approach of, oh, hey, you're painting this, you're doing this. Good job. That looks really great. It's just, get up, strap up, and, be a man and go off to war.
Yeah, and I think that's a thing. That's why I feel this is the most Whale's movie, because a lot of him personally is put into the movie. And I think that works because he was given carte blanche to make it.
Yeah.
But after we see the hermit sequence, that's when the two diverging stories finally collide.
Yeah.
We finally get Henry and Pretorius. They clash with the monster as they're creating the bride.
Yeah.
Pretorius, buys in the monster by saying, if you do what I say, then you shall be able to get your revenge on Henry, and you'll have a bride.
Mm-hmm.
And the
monster being trusting.
The monster's like, well, absolutely, so that sounds lovely to me. That's how the monster talks now. And
does he?
In my headcanon, he does.
Okay.
Very British. But we finally get to see the Bride of Frankenstein. We finally get to see Elsa Lanchester.
Yes.
In makeup, that striking image, and
iconic. And she's doing a lot with not a lot of time. No.
And it's a detriment to the movie. I wanted us to have the bride for a little bit longer. I think she should have an extra scene before she is revealed to Frankenstein. There should be the bride is created, the bride exists on her own in this new world, and then the bride is introduced to Frankenstein, and then we have the climax of the movie, or the end of the movie.
Yeah, because this movie had 15 minutes of it taken off because of, ratings and people being like, that's not appropriate, and
the production code had a lot of things where you can't have things that are immoral, you can't show the church in a bad light, the government in a bad light. Hey, when Frankenstein tries to take Jesus off the cross, that's a big no-no.
Yeah,
there's a few things like that.
Yeah, but it's okay, with those extra 15 minutes, we could have told a lot more of the bride's story. And I actually, deep dived into the internet to do research on the movie, and I actually found it was a magazine article from some movie magazine, and they were talking to Elsa Lanchester, and they're like, you were in The Bride, and what are your thoughts? And they asked her, had they come to you and said, hey, we're gonna do another movie with The Bride, would you come back? And she's like, oh, absolutely. She's like, if they kept rewriting The Bride for different movies, I would have come back every single time.
Really?
So it was wow, okay, it wasn't a thing of, yeah, guys, I was in, this movie for 6 minutes, get over it. It was No, the bride was really cool, and they should have expanded her story.
My guess is she had a much easier time at getting in and out of makeup than Karloff did.
His makeup was 5 hours, because Jack Pierce found a way around it. Hers was 4 hours. But she was,
It's all in the hair, isn't it?
the hair that is actually her hair.
Yeah.
It's not a wig. It's her hair that they did with what is it? It's like a beehive kind of.
It's like a chicken wire thing, right?
Beehive chicken wire setup that they just kind of like put her hair around to get it to stand up. Because I'm like, okay, like pretty cool. But also, most of the time when we see her, she's wrapped up in the gauze.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of production stills behind the scenes where she's sitting, in a chair and she's fully wrapped in gauze. And it's like, that's got to be tough to just be completely wrapped to where you can't even feed yourself. People have to feed you or give you something to drink.
Yeah, because these were, famously way too tight. They
Oh,
were,
yeah.
Mummified gauze, great, right? She couldn't move by herself. She had to be, carried places.
It had to be carried. A lot of the pictures, she's it looks like the lawn chairs that have, the bed on it, so you could, sprawl out. So that was her, basically in a laying down position. But I know they had a couple of stand-ins for her that were also wrapped in gauze, because you got to give her a break if you're only seeing just her eyes.
And I know this much, that I think it was half the stand-ins had panic attacks because they couldn't deal with the claustrophobia.
It was one. There was one stand-in. I don't know if it was early in production or towards the end, but she ended up having a full-blown panic attack where they had to take her out of the gauze, crying, screaming, and it was just kudos to you, Elsa, because that's got to be rough to be completely bandaged up, not be able to move, breathe, go to the bathroom, basically do anything that you want to do.
Well, I think it goes to the fact that how professional she was, and I think her background, because her and Charles Lawton were married for 50 years. They were married forever.
They did a lot of movies together.
They did a few, and Charles Lawton, he was another one of these people who was a very trained theater actor. You do the role, you do the role, you get paid whatever it calls for, as long as you're a good actor. It works out. And I think he won an Oscar the year before.
Mm-hmm.
And Elsa Lanchester was also one of these people who was lived and breathed performing arts, theatrics, things like that. Her background was in dance, I believe.
Yeah, she actually was taught by Isadora Duncan, who's this famous dancer. And, she was taught as a young child, and then she came back to the UK where she started her own children's theater company, which evolved into a cabaret show that she would do. So she's, gone from stage to singing. I guess she even had early on records that she was doing. So she's very multi-talented, but also very used to the stage and the performing life. So I think that's what helped her, be able to kind of all right, this is another thing I have to do for work, and just breathe and we'll get through it. It's not as bad as Karloff, who really has to go through...
Who had broken his hip. You cannot bitch to Boris Karloff on the set of Frankenstein as he's walking in with duct tape wrapped around his crotch, being my hip is shattered, and I'm still doing the performance.
Yeah.
You're gonna bitch to me that the light's hitting your eyes in a weird position? Fuck off my stage. I know Karloff was famously really nice, but I want to imagine he was that catty bitch.
No, I don't think
I want that just one time.
No. But he did lose another 20 pounds making this movie because
he lost 40 during Frankenstein.
I know.
Jesus Christ.
But I saw another thing with I think it was the same article with Elsa where she talked about that sequence with her eyes. And she said that took maybe all day to film because they needed to get it just right. They needed her to have that shocked expression. So she was my eyes were killing me from the bright flashes. It's I've worked in the past with strobe lighting, and those lights are very bright. Is being behind the camera, even we have to kind of close our eyes because it gets to be too much.
It's very intense.
It's very intense, very bright. But to get, flashed in the eyes over and over and over again until you finally get the right expression, I was damn. Well, seeing spots for days.
Oh, yeah. But that's Elsa Lanchester.
Yes.
And for 6 minutes, she's doing a lot with very little. She
Doesn't speak.
Doesn't speak at all. There's a couple of hisses. Her head like pops around like a bird. Which, did you know where she got her performance from?
Yes, I did. It's from swans in a park.
It's from some shitty geese her and her husband saw at a park.
It's swans.
Whatever they were shitty birds.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm afraid of geese. I've been chased by them a couple of times. They scar you for life. But I guess swans are a bit more mean. And that's where she kind of got it from, where they're these beautiful things, but, you know, they kind of show you, stay away, I will come after you. And I think that's kind of genius for her to, you know, use the hisses from a swan to kind of be like her mechanism, because Karloff hisses the growl.
Yeah. It's very animalistic between the two of them. And this moment, I think, really wraps up a lot of Whale's ideas, because the monster finally shows up. He thinks he's finally found a friend.
Yes.
And the bride rejects him for, you know, and even then, you can even look at this in another level where, oh, you've created a woman whose sole purpose is to be with a man.
Very misogynistic.
Very misogynistic, and Whale's, being a pretty, you know, smart, kind of forward-thinking director, says...
That's what he's trying to show you.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, no, people aren't created just for other people to own them.
Exactly.
You know, she has autonomy. And the monster, in that moment, I think realizes something that, okay, the life around me is something that is just cruel, and me being alive is not the answer, because I'm not what you are. Like, no. I'm not human.
No.
I'm an alien in a strange land.
Yeah.
So, I don't belong in life, we belong dead. And he kills him, right?
Yeah.
And great line, you know, we belong dead. Great performance by Karloff. And blows up. And it annoys the hell out of me that Henry lives.
I know, and...
Why is he still alive?
He lives because that was, you know, a time in Hollywood where they had to have a happy ending at the end of the film. And it pisses me off because Henry doesn't atone for his sins in this movie.
Exactly.
He gets away with it. He gets a happy ending, even though there is a gaffe, and you can see when it explodes and they show the inside of the laboratory, he's against one of the walls. So it was filmed that he does die with them. But, you know, the Hollywood, what is it?
The secret Hollywood elites in their chambers of orphan children.
The Illuminati?
Exactly. What did I say? But
the censors, they're like, no, you need to make this a happy ending. So they rewrote it where him and Elizabeth, you know, get to walk off into the sunset, and whew, well, wasn't that a bad, you know, couple of days? And it's just like, no, dude, you got a whole bunch of people murdered. You created these two beings. One of them only got to live for a couple of minutes and then explodes.
And the other thing is, the smart version of this movie, I guess the movie's smart, but like the smart ending to this is for the heart of the bride, because there's a problem. The heart of the bride gets like messed up, so they need a new one.
Yeah. And
the henchmen just go out and murder a random woman and take it back. It should have been they killed Elizabeth and used her heart in the bride, and Henry realizes this and realizes his own hubris caused the death of the woman he loved. And
I blew your mind when I told you that, didn't I?
You did, right? And because that was the original ending, right?
It
was like a proposed ending. Yeah, I don't know if it was ever filmed.
I think someone proposed the idea that it be Elizabeth's heart, because that's part of the storyline to get Henry to do this, is that the monster kidnaps Elizabeth, and it's like, you know what, we're going to use her as incentive for you to get this, you know, this task done for us. And that was the proposed thing of, you know, Henry's doing this, they give him the heart, they bring the bride to life, and it's, you know, okay, now do I get Elizabeth? And it's like, well, you have her right here. Here's your bride. And it's just, you know...
And that's the twist. It's like, it's not the bride of the monster. It's the bride of Frankenstein.
Of Frankenstein. This is your wife.
That would have been a twist. That would have been something that I think hammers home a lot of the stuff around Henry, and it gives him his comeuppance, but it is way too dark for this movie.
It's also in the De Niro movie, where I think Frankenstein kills Henry's wife.
Yeah, and, well, that's true to the book.
Victor's wife. And he brings her back to life, but she doesn't come back as her. She comes back kind of this like wild animalistic version, like the lizard brain is like clicked on, so
it's the thing in like Pet Sematary,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Sometimes dead is better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good old Frank Gwynn. Have you watched Monsters yet?
No, I have not. I'm still deciding if I'm gonna watch it.
Still fighting that itch.
I mean, I kind of want to watch it because it's Munsters and I love the Munsters, but I've also seen a lot of clips and I don't love it.
Again, you know you're gonna watch it. Just bite the bullet already.
Maybe. But yeah, I really think that they should have done that twist of, well, we killed your one true love and she lives on through this new creature. Here is your your comeuppance, and then you're gonna die with us in this explosion because you've just caused too much pain and mayhem. That
would have been the more dramatic, definitive conclusion of this story, but we don't get that. We get the happy ending, and that's the Bride of Frankenstein, more or less. But anything else about the movie you wanted to pick on before we kind of like round up?
Well, I definitely wanted to talk about the score, because the score of this movie, this is 1935. This is, early in filmmaking. We
just got sound like 7 years before this, 8
years
before this.
Sound is still very new. We even have music during the credits, which was a new thing at the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's in The Invisible Man too, that there's also music throughout the credits, so that was a very new concept. And for this movie, it has one of the best scores for a Universal monster film.
It's definitely one of the better ones that I've seen in a minute, but the thing is, the most recent ones I've watched are like Dracula, which has no music.
No, and I think
Frankenstein,
that works,
which has one
opening,
and then like The Invisible Man, which it's like it's there in the credits, but I don't think there's any throughout the movie. There might be one, but I don't think it's actually throughout the movie. This one is like a full score.
Yeah, and it was by Franz Waxman. He's a German composer. And, I mean, it's still regarded as one of the best soundtracks or scores of all time. And it's like, we're in 2022 and people are still talking about this score. It's very haunting. It's very dreamlike. They use, like... Surrealist, yeah. They use harps, and it makes you think, like, okay, we're going back into, to memories, to thoughts. But Franz Waxman, I don't know if you know a lot of scores that he's done. Through his career?
You shoot me off a couple.
Alright, so we have Rebecca by Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh.
The Philadelphia Story. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Oh, yeah, that's the Barrymore version?
I think so. Sunset Boulevard.
That's a good movie.
And Rear Window.
Oh, yeah, Rear Window has a great score.
But I mean, this man has been nominated for 12 Oscars in his career, and won 2.
That's strong.
Yeah, so I mean, this guy, he won for Sunset Boulevard and A Place in the Sun. But I mean, this, man is just so incredibly talented and really, was able to also breathe life into the movie, because you're able to pick up that the bride has her own theme. Anytime they talk about, we need to make a mate for the monster, her theme, kind of subtly kicks into the scene up until we meet her, and then at full, orchestra, we get her.
Yeah, and I think the score of the movie really helps setting mood, setting tone, creating atmosphere, because that's all the movie cares about.
Yeah.
Is tone, mood, atmosphere. That's it. I don't think it really cares about a plot so much. It cares about telling its story, but its plot from moment to moment, not totally concerned with it. Naturalistic performances, we're not at that area yet. He's looking to play to the cheap seats. And he's doing his comedy, but the movie really does have an atmosphere to it, and I think that's the key to why the film is so successful. And that's, I guess, the last question I want to kind of roll in on before we give our final verdicts.
Sure.
Because this is the first sequel to a Universal monster film.
Yeah.
This might be one of the first sequels in Hollywood?
That I'm not 100% sure, but it might be the truest sequel to a film.
So yeah, something that's like very directly like, oh yeah, this is a direct sequel. We are using the same actor, same everything. It's not like Gold Diggers of 33, Gold Diggers of 35, where I honestly I don't even know too much about those movies. I just know they're musicals, but for the sake of this, it's a very early sequel regardless. Why is it, do you think, that this film has held on for so long and has kind of supplanted Frankenstein in quality? Because the original Frankenstein, I think people remember when they think, oh, I remember Frankenstein, that's the one with like the hermit, right? And that's the one where it's like, oh yeah, the bride shows up at the end.
That was you, right? You thought that a lot of this movie was mixed in with the first movie, right?
I thought they were one movie. I thought like, oh yeah, the Frankenstein, that's this, and the Bride of Frankenstein's like a sequel where the two of them run off into the hills or some shit. I literally created a Bride of Frankenstein movie in my head because I didn't remember what the movie was about.
Yeah.
And I owe a lot of that to Mel Brooks, because I think Young Frankenstein, it amalgamizes the two of them, and I think people's impression of Frankenstein is that. But I want to know, why do you think the Bride of Frankenstein has kind of held on so long when a lot of other monster sequels didn't?
I think it's just the perfect storm. It took a lot to make this movie, but once it got made, it was just gold. I mean, nothing's been able to touch it. I know you had told me in the past that only one time there was a remake of this movie in the 80s, and it just kind of flopped because...
Well, they have tried to remake it a million times. Like, the one in the 80s had, like, Jennifer Beals and Sting in it. And it didn't make any money. If you're wondering why no one's heard of it, that's probably why. And they've tried to remake it since, like, 2000, I think. And most recently they had Angelina Jolie and Javier Bardem attached to it in like 2020, I think.
2019, I think, when they were trying to do like the Dark Universe for Universal, and then the Tom Cruise Mummy came out and just destroyed that concept.
Well, the Tom Cruise Mummy film came out, and it didn't do enough money to garner interest. And
well, I mean, it's also a Tom Cruise movie, so his people come in and they rewrite the script, and then they do it the way to, Tom Cruise's liking.
Because Tom Cruise is a star, right?
Yeah.
You bring Tom Cruise in because you know he's going to bring in box office, but you have to play by his rules.
Yeah, and I mean, that completely obliterated the Dark Universe path that we were about to embark on. And I mean, I was upset because it's like, this original film, The Bride of Frankenstein, is just, in my eyes, perfection. I mean, there's nothing that can touch it. It is the perfect storm of actors, storyline, music, concept, and I was kind of excited to see where we could take it in this generation. And after seeing the Tom Cruise movie, I was kind of like, maybe it's better that it didn't work out that way. But after The Invisible Man in 2020, that gave me hope to, maybe there are filmmakers out there that can pay homage, but also do it in a different way than we would expect The Bride.
I understand that, because we saw the Invisible Man remake, which has nothing to do with the H.G. Wells story.
That was also our last movie we went to go see before the world ended.
That is true. But that's the thing. That movie worked because it took the idea and just dumped everything else. And it told the story of an abused woman, and it was focused on how people light people. And it was a movie that was smart. It was made on a completely minuscule budget, and I think it worked so well because it was talented filmmakers just trying to tell a story within the genre. The problem with The Bride, though, is you can't just make The Bride of Frankenstein.
You have to do Frankenstein.
You have to do a Frankenstein movie, and after the Frankenstein movie, you have to do the Bride movie. And
so this is our plea to please let Guillermo del Toro take on these projects. He would be the most truest person to embark this journey, because he loves these movies just as much as all of us do.
Well, he's also been pining to give it a shot for years.
Decades.
At this point. Yeah, at least 10 years. I know at least 10 years he's wanted to do a Frankenstein movie. I would like to see how it would happen. But I want At the Mountains of Madness before that, goddammit. I want his Lovecraft movie first. But that's just me, you know.
I mean, I'm just happy with this movie. I mean, I love this movie so much. I love Elsa Lanchester, you know, a true icon in just 6 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, Karloff, who actually gets his name on the main card as...
It's finally not a question mark.
It's not a question mark. Elsa Lanchester takes the question mark in this movie. But she also gets her name on the cards because she does play Mary Shelley.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just a lot of iconography in this film. There's just a lot of heart and soul in this movie.
It's the most James Whale film that James Whale ever made.
Yeah, and I mean, there's just so much going on. There was one point I didn't get to make about the humanity of the monster. When he encounters the goat herd and scares her and she falls off the side of the waterfall and into the water, and you see he jumps into the water right away and rescues her. It's like, okay, you know, yes, you know, he's the monster, quotation marks, but it's like, you know, he's learned from his first mistake of little Maria and he's able to save this girl. It's like, there is good in this monster, and it just shows that not all monsters are bad, not all people are good.
But that is The Bride of Frankenstein. So final verdict on The Bride of Frankenstein. Is this just 2 thumbs up across the board?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I'm in the same boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, the movie's really, really good. I think it holds up enough that people now could find it entertaining.
Yeah.
And I think telling people, oh, come in and get scared is not how you should come in with the movie. Come in and just enjoy the ride. It's more funny than anything.
It's not a scary movie. It's a fun movie. It's a beautiful movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw this movie when I think I was 6, and I mean, seeing her for the first time just kind of took my breath away.
You're
because
like, you can wear black lipstick? Oh my word. Was that where you were like, black eyeliner? Ooh.
I mean, fun fact, you know that brand Suavecito, they do like the pomade?
Yes, yeah.
Suavecita, their female line, they actually did this whole Universal endorsed or Universal like branded Bride of Frankenstein line, where they did like the dark lipsticks and lip liner. My best friend, she actually got me like the whole set, and it's like these really cool books, and it's Elsa Lanchester printed on, you know, everything, and it's just like, I'm probably not gonna use these, but fuck yeah, I have like black lipstick now, or it's dark green. It's something I'm like,
so
this
you can
is
finally
awesome.
go all goth on us.
I could do that for Halloween.
But yes, so I would recommend Bride of Frankenstein to anybody listening, but what will they be listening to next week?
Oh, no. I don't get to plug next week because, you know, we've talked about my favorite Universal monster film, so I think it's only fair you get to talk about yours.
Yes, the actual best James Whale's film, which is the Invisible Man, starring Claude Rains, also Oscar winner Gloria Stewart.
Yes.
And I'm very excited for this because it is the best Universal monster film ever made. Has best effects, has probably the most prestige, most actors that are great in every film they're in.
In Dean's humble opinion, yes.
In my correct opinion. And I'm very excited. We're going to do The Invisible Man next week from 1933. And I'm very excited. This movie, I think, holds up more than any other Universal movie I've watched.
It holds up. For me, it's, I think, the funniest Universal monsters.
Most definitely. And I think it's pinned by probably the best singular performance from from any of the Universal actors in the canon.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to talk about it. But that's next week.
Yeah, so if you want to listen to us on a different platform than you currently are, you can find us on Anchor FM, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
Yes, you can go to our YouTube channel, The Film Vault. That is The Film Vault on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. We release a new video every week. And if you wanted to follow us on our socials, you can go to
The Film Club Podcast on Instagram, where we post daily stories, upcoming episodes, trivia, and just random adventures that we go on finding movie history.
And with that,
we'll see you next week at the Film Club.
Have a good weekend.